Hello, people, and welcome back to another episode of Ball of a Passion. My name is Karen, and we are here for the preseason review. As preseason is now, I would say, over. I don't know if you're counting Community Shield as preseason, or we're counting it as a trophy. I don't know what we're doing with that. So, yeah, that's let's just have a chat about what's going on with how we've progressed this preseason. I think it's not been the rambunctious preseason of last season, the swashbuckling performances that we had at the beginning of the last preseason, with the Chelsea performance, and I think that's the one that stands out. But going back to the this preseason, it's more of a case of, I think, more trying to experiment, trying to make sure that we get the right combinations, and trying to get people in specific positions with specific personnel together. So yeah. What about you guys? George first, and then Chris.
I think that this preseason was like a little bit different of a focus. Last preseason, I feel as though that we tried to implement a new system. We tried to have a plan A in place from day dot, and it was kind of a sustainable system that we just didn't really change throughout the season. And I don't think that we saw too many changes. We of course experimented a bit in preseason. The two twin striker system that we saw in preseason really didn't see for the rest of the season. But broadly speaking, we kind of just had a primary plan A. And one of the big things that I think a criticism of Mikel Arteta is that, when he does employ a plan A and he doesn't have a replacement, whether that's through injury, whether that's through somebody not being available, he struggles to create an effective plan B, or at least effectively balance the squad with enough time to meet our objectives. I think he eventually always gets there, but part of the frustration is that I think balance isn't optimized in the moment. And so when I had a look at this preseason, generally, I don't think we've seen a set system. I don't think we've seen set roles, and I think that he's tried people in different roles to kind of experiment about the squad and try to figure out things that he didn't quite know. So, a big thing for me was just learning more about what roles other people can play, learning about the limits of the squad, and then trying to test those limits. Because I don't feel that we saw maybe the press that we've seen of the last season, but there were moments, for example, in Barcelona, like what doesn't make me concerned, like just to address Alex's point here, is the fact that when we did see primary roles and we did see people in those roles, the press was beautiful. So uh, I don't think that it's a case of the team not knowing that. I think it's more of a case of Mikel trying to experiment in different roles here because he knows a plan A, the squad knows a plan A, and we know what we're doing at this point. I think the next part is understanding if we had to change things up and do something a little bit unorthodox, how does the squad deal with those kind of roles? And I think that was the goal of this preseason. So different goals for me compared to last year, but perhaps why we never really saw an exact plan A, and maybe why there's a lot more anxiety for a lot of fans watching right now, because I don't think we've yet to see our starting 11, by the way. And it's not even just Declan Rice with Thomas Partey or even the Zinchenko being out. Like, I don't think that we've seen Mikel Arteta's preferred starting 11. And part of that is because he's still trying to figure out things with the squad.
Yeah, Chris.
Yeah, I really agree with George. I think the preseason objective this year, especially going into the season with different objectives, like we have Champions League, we didn't have Champions League last year. We kind of fell off towards the end of the season. A lot of that was to do, towards the end of the last two seasons, and a lot of that was to do with us not being able to use our squad when players went down. Like Zinchenko has been injured for a couple weeks now. He didn't play the last 3 games of the season. He got injured within the season. Jesus may get an injury. Like, when those injuries happen, Partey has been injured at the end of every season. When those injuries happen, the team hasn't adapted well to it at all. The results have been different this time around. We lost to United. A lot of people cared about that, but that doesn't really matter. Like, before the season, Liverpool beat Man City last year, and Man City did the treble. So the preseason results don't really matter, but they're there to get the fitness up. Like, Declan Rice hasn't looked as fit as he could, or as he does throughout the season, but they're there to get the fitness up. If you go far in everything, you could end up playing 60 games. So he needs to try now, seeing different partnerships: Timber left back, right back, centre mid, for just him, for example, playing people in different positions with different players so they learn, because I'm very sure there will come a point in the season where we see a Saliba injury or something like that, and you see Kiwior next to Gabriel, but they've done it before rather than it being the first time. So I think that's been the aim of this preseason. And it's different from Mikel. He doesn't do this. He doesn't plan in advance for new things like that. He rarely does it. So I think it's good to see him having contingency plans in effect already before we need to create them.
Yeah, I mean, this is the main thing I think we've struggled with in the last, I think, 2 seasons now, maybe even 3 if you count the Villarreal debacle, is finishing out what we started. I think that's the main thing we need to address this season, as opposed to how good we are, in August, in September. I think we've got the schedule now for August. I don't think there should be any worries there. It's the question is when it gets to April, when it gets to May, how are we going to, cope with the amount of games we're going to have coming at us? We've seen how Man City done it. They've managed to really understand how to chase teams, how to get through difficult spots, especially when you have players like Cancelo in January go off and they had problems themselves, but they managed to rejig and reformularize and make sure at the end of the season you have your best 11 at the end at the right time, so you can build on the platform that you created for the first like 20-25 games.
And I don't even think it's just about preparing your best 11 for maybe the best period of the season, perhaps, because I mean, look, the season has ups and downs, and typically we've seen Arsenal fail towards the tail end of, I'd say, from March to kind of the end of the season for the last 2 to 3 years under Mikel. There's always been context for why we may have done those things, but ultimately we have failed the objective there. And one of the big reasons for that is that kind of versatility. The one question I might have is, you look at Arsenal in terms of what was the starting 11, and I think everybody could kind of list their starting 11 from Arsenal for a majority of the season. And in fact, we were the team with the most starters most consistently all of last season. So in terms of, using the squad, this idea that Man City have basically a 15 to 16 man squad they trust is really important. I mean, I look at some of their most important players. I mean, Chris, the apps and kind of every person, with FBref a little bit more than most people. But I would argue, I don't think that there was more than 3 or 4 players that earned more than 30 games of the 38 game season. And there were many of Arsenal's players that had played 30 of the 38 games in the season. And I think that in and of itself is a really big issue. I think when you look at Man City, the average squad participation was anywhere between 20 to 25. I think somebody can pull up the numbers for exact stuff on that, but it wouldn't surprise me if I was to go through their entire squad list, and roughly 20 to 25 games was probably the average of what most of the people were playing. And ours was significantly higher. Now, for me, more minutes doesn't mean more fatigue. I actually think this is one of the biggest misconceptions in sport. One of the big issues that you've got is when you're having too many players kind of playing in the same zones, you become predictable. That was one of the biggest things for me, because when I look at past the World Cup, Arsenal's kind of control of transitions took a nosedive. I think in terms of controlling some of the defensive transitions has actually been a problem even in preseason. Like in terms of the new roles, one of the biggest critiques that we might say is that I think we've looked a little open in transition. And so that for me has been one of the benefits that we're trying to do, so that we understand, look, when we have a plan A available, we know how to play, but when we don't have that available, are we able to be as compact as we were in the first half? And I think that for me is going to be probably the biggest benefit to this preseason in terms of results not being as good, but the play itself, learning. I'm hoping that that's what Mikel is going to take away from it, because that for me was a big issue last year.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah,
I think
our starters.
yeah.
I was going to say our starters did play too many minutes. Gabriel was in the top 5 for most minutes played. Ramsdale was in top 5. He played every minute. We did play, if you compare to Man City, for example, we had 5 players playing more minutes than Edison, who was their number 1. And you shouldn't really even compare keepers. It was Erdegaard, Saka, Ramsdale, White, and Gabriel. They all played more minutes than Edison, for example. And that is something we will need to change. That is something that should have been changed already. We had the same starting lineup for the most times in Europe. I think that those type of stats isn't something a title contender really should have. Trying to go deep in every competition, you can't really have Saka starting nearly every game, Gabriel starting every game. You can't really have that to contend on all fronts, especially this season. We have improved the squad depth. We have, like, Declan Rice played left centre mid yesterday. Played DM versus Barcelona.
Barcelona.
Yeah. He played DM versus Barcelona. So we do have now players. Well, we did, but we do have now players that he trusts to play different positions, and hopefully he continues the trust going into the season. We don't know our group yet, and at the end of August, I think we'll have a better idea on knowing what the team will look like, what the Champions League team will look like, what the Cup team will look like, and I think it's intriguing going into the season. It was very different last season. We knew 100% the lineup, what it was going to be every single week. It was never really a surprise. And when there was a new thing, everyone just goes crazy on the timeline. Is he injured? Is he not? Stuff like that. So yeah, it is
Yeah, you're right.
intriguing.
Actually, it was United. Yeah,
Hopefully, he continues this. I'm not sure he will though, but hopefully he continues this.
Yeah, it was United because it was the spaces in transition that we were worried about. The spaces Mount was picking up. You're right. It was United. Yeah, with Havertz. Yeah. Let's just run through the games quickly and just give a quick overview of what you took away from it. First, we'll start with Nuremberg. What did you guys think of Nuremberg?
I think my first thought on Nuremberg was Saka's looking sharp. He looked very fit. He started the pre-season very well. We didn't really see the new boys till second half, and I mean, for me, Nuremberg didn't really mean much. Like,
No.
it always is. It was our first preseason game last year as well. The players are coming on second half. You see guys like Cedric, who we haven't seen since, and I felt Havertz was finding good positions in that game. His movement showed in that game. But apart from Havertz's good movement and Saka being sharp, I don't really remember much. If I'm being honest, I don't really remember much since that game. There's been 4 games since that. It's been a couple of weeks, so yeah. Saka started sharp. That was my main thing for that game, yeah.
Well, I think Saka's been sharp all of preseason too.
He didn't look unfit at all.
Yeah, that's one of the preseason kind of takeaways. And in fact, I mean, it got to the other end of the spectrum where I think people have said, oh, Saka looks so sharp. I think that he looked jaded towards the end of last season. I think we kind of miss when Saka is fit. And I kind of say this a lot about Thomas Partey because I feel like when he's fit and you kind of know when Saka is fit as well. Like the idea that Saka has lost some of his dribbling ability is something that I've seen floated online is quite ridiculous to me. He has looked very sharp. Another player that's looked insanely sharp for me broadly over preseason would have been Trossard. For me, you have to put Saka away from match reviews. For me, that guy is a unicorn. And then when you start to talk about the next up, who was the MVP of preseason, it was Trossard. For me, he's been kind of our most informed player of preseason, showing a really good ability to look, cough, cough, all the viewers have missed that. The Trossard central midfielder shouts for me have actually finally become a real thing. And I think the biggest benefit that I've seen with Trossard is his efficiency. I think one thing that you can see is maybe he hasn't started every game, but even when he's come on in cameos, he typically provides the most chances that have been created in the game. I think, even in our most recent game, he was on for a really short period of time. And, again, my big takeaway is he's not here to become a bench player. Trossard did come to become a starter. And, there was that really cool podcast, I think, I don't know the name of it, but they're pretty famous. They're with like the Sidemen or whatever. Where
The fellas,
yeah. And there's like that great clip that kind of goes around in terms of Ramsdale saying, "Listen, Trossard's coming because he believes he can start," and like you can really see that mentality. And I just think having somebody that's an experienced pro able to both drop in and fill in anywhere in the front line is going to be so huge for us. And look, we've already seen with the Gabby Jesus. Maybe you can talk about that really briefly with the arthroscopic kind of return. Look, it's nothing huge. Like foreign bodies or loose bodies are very typical post-surgery and post-op. It doesn't happen all the time, but it is a really common complication. And typically it's just scar tissue that gets removed, maybe a cleanup of the meniscus. But nothing crazy. And the fact that Mikel says it's going to be only a couple weeks means that there wasn't really a large amount of irritation. So I'd say 3 weeks, three,
Yeah.
4 max, in terms of his return. And one of the benefits, by the way, a lot of people are saying this will interrupt his rhythm. It won't. Like, he hasn't been away for long enough for it to improve or decline fitness. So that's one of the benefits. I mean, he'll have done the surgery already, and he'll be out on the training pitch in a week and a half. Like, it won't be a case of him not being able to run. Uh,
If anything, it's just a cleanup.
Yeah,
That's the basic way to describe it. I think the best way to describe it is.
And the best way is because
Yeah.
arthroscopic are like little incisions, like, not to get really too technical, like, there isn't a huge amount to like really
No.
heal, quote unquote. The structure's not the issue there, really. So, which is a good
Yeah.
thing, because I also, speaking of Jesus, just to round it off, I think he was another one of my surprise packages where I think he finally looked back to preseason Jesus. I hate using these terms, but he looked poppy. He looked really bright, and he looked like combative for the fight. And so he was kind of popping up on both sides of the wings. And I think he was doing a little bit more in terms of competing in duels. I think towards when he had come back from his injury, he looked a little hesitant to go into duels. And one of the big things I think of preseason is he finally looked a little bit more ready for contact individually himself. And William Saliba, another one that really impressed in preseason. He always impresses. Like, if there was ever any doubt whether the back injury was something that would keep you long term, which there wasn't, but I know that there were some fans that were worried about that. But for me, that was a very, very bright player, along with Kieran Tierney. But I don't want to take away all the food for everybody else, so I'll let somebody else talk about that.
Yeah.
But even though Kieran Tierney is definitely one from the cold, maybe you'll ask a question about who you think was a surprise package. But he was somebody
for
that
sure.
became the prettiest boy in the room again.
I think the main thing, I'm surprised neither of you, but I thought the Balogun cameo at Nuremberg, I think that was what I took, because a lot of fans were
And
going
the
off
youngsters, actually.
the youngsters as well. I think Ethan, that was my next point. The Ethan and Miles cameos were sensational, especially Ethan. I think he had some great moments. Balogun came on, he missed that chance, but I think that people are going to start to realize that Balogun, as good as he is, and he's still got that, but he's still got that wasteful quality to him, that he does waste some chances.
He's always
Like,
been wasteful.
He's always been a wasteful. He gets into these positions. He gets into great positions, and he's great at linking play, great at doing running the channels, making sure that he gets into good positions, especially in the 6-yard box. But the question is there's been multiple times me and Chris shared that there's this one picture of him constantly where he's put his hand up, hoping that offside. He's offside, but he's not offside. But yeah, the thing is, right, I think a lot of fans are going to do the whole now you're saying, now he's leaving, now you're saying he's shit. No, he's a very, very talented boy, and I think that the price we're asking for him is very valid. But that's another podcast. So so USA Tour, MLS Skills Challenge, Havertz banter started and then was shut up by the MLS All-Star Game. The combo, I thought the pitch was nasty. That was a nasty ass pitch.
Welcome to America.
Yeah,
every pitch in America was not
like
good.
like both of you know the NFL complaints consistently about pitches in North America. They're not produce good pitches. It's not looking good for the World Cup. But the main thing for both, I'm going to combine them together because I don't really see them needing two separate segments. But the main thing I took away from that was I think that Trossard. I think that's the main thing I took away from it. I think he was sensational in both. I think obviously the game, the All-Star game itself, but Trossard and Timber, I think would be the two I would pick out from that game. I think Trossard in that left center mid role was sensational. They do need. I think a lot more things need universal healthcare, not just the pitches, but that's a whole different scenario. But Trossard in that game was sensational. I think that Tierney assist was great combo. And I know you're itching to get into it, George, so I'll let you go on it.
Well, it's frustrating for me because it's about balance, guys. Like, one thing that I think that we should take away from preseason, by the way, is we got to stop talking about individuals within a team. Like, everybody wants to do player wars on Twitter. It's becoming so tiring for me. Like, I'm beyond tired at this idea that so and so should be here, and for example, Trossard is the most stylistic complement to Jesus, and when we find somebody out, we have to find the stylistic exact replica of that player. No, look, pods are something that I really believe that we should start to be looking at in terms of the team, especially with looking at a positional system. You don't replace one player for one, like for like. What you're doing is you're trying to replace a chemistry with different players. And it becomes no shock to me that, Kieran Tierney shines when you basically have an inverted right back as an option. And it shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody. This idea that, we had a Ben White role on the right, it was lunacy to me that people couldn't see. Why could you not replicate that on the left? And listen, last season we didn't have maybe a proper inverted option. I would kind of disagree personally. I always felt that Thomas Partey could play the role. And then cough, cough, we do it at the very last game of the season when, the pressure's off. But even now, by recruiting Jurrien Timber, who I think we should talk about as its own segment, by the way, because somebody that, impressed me when I was scouting him. I think there's a lot of things there that we can work with, but ultimately he gives you that flexibility to allow Kieran Tierney a new lease of life. And I think that Kieran Tierney, beyond just the role, looks sharp all of preseason, by the way. Like his passes in between the lines, his application didn't look to me like a player convinced of leaving. And everybody told me that he was gone, at the start of the season and he was going off to Newcastle. But looks a player for me committed. And he kind of had an interview that kind of broke out. He lost motivation last year. And I really don't know why that is a surprise to a lot of people. One of the biggest things that we need to do as a team really is to make sure that we're feeling the bench, making sure, the bench itself feels appreciated. That's going to be important. It's all well and good that we've experimented in some of these games, but making sure that the bench feels appreciated is going to be really, really important for me. And I think that the one thing with Jurrien Timber that I loved is I could see somebody that appreciated different zones. And while he had kind of a mixed bag in different games, I think that ironically he showed some of his best moments in positions that he wasn't comfortable with. And, Mikel actually tweaked some of the lineup because we did recognize that, Timber wasn't 100% comfortable coming in, by the way. And, when you talk about him maybe not looking 100% ready and united, and then you look towards what just happened in terms of Declan Rice and kind of making him go a little bit wide in our most previous game, that was a direct response, by the way, to learning about Timber and his ability to invert in the United game. Like that exact kind of solution about forcing Declan Rice a little bit wider in our other one was kind of something that we saw as a consequence for that first experimentation. So I was excited. In terms of the All-Star Challenge, look, it was fun seeing it all. I think Kiwior was probably the standout of that challenge after Havertz got destroyed broadly. But the MLS All-Star game for me was just a good run out. I also don't think you draw any conclusions from there. Respectfully, it's a league that's nowhere near the level, and I don't think that they offered an opposition there that provided anything more than just a training exercise for Arsenal at the end of the day. But again, the one thing that I will talk about, and we'll probably get to United, I know I'm going to prompt Chris on it, but transitions and transition control was the name of the game. I felt that having Declan Rice in there, that was the one game, the United game, that I don't think that we had our structure properly integrated. You looked at the pass map for that, it was really U-shaped, and there was nobody within 10 to 15 yards of Declan Rice starting in the middle. And that was a really frustrating thing for me to see. People were still learning, but clearly the structure didn't work well in that game. And I would point towards balance. Again, who was our starting winger? Who was our starting midfielder? And who was behind in terms of the fullback? We need to understand that I think you cannot pair two big space runners next to each other or people that like to prefer the same zones. So we need to get a little bit better at that. And it's no surprise that the best pod from that game was, who I'm going to say, Trossard, Emil Smith-Rowe, and a certain, out of the Baron Scotsman. So, I mean, I just think that it makes sense for that pod to work, but for other people, it didn't. And I don't know why. I think that some of these players solve things that the other players don't have. And that's the one thing that we've got to learn from this preseason, not to maybe force players into the team because that's what we want to see happen. We need to see what partnerships have worked well. One thing that I don't think worked well in that game, by the way, Gabriel, central center back, something that was experimented with. I don't know why. He was the very last person that should have been experimented with as a central center back. You could have put Tomiyasu ahead. You could have put Kiwior even, who has a lot more fluid receiving on both sides, would have done better in the central role. I just think that Gabriel, while he's improved on the ball, it's not something that he's ever naturally going to be very good at. He is a dueler. He's a warrior. So let him duel in the wide spaces. Like, don't force him to be the calm, composed head. He's not going to do that. So make sure that your distribution responsibilities are a little bit more clear. And so that was one of the big frustrations of the United game for me.
Yeah, I think in the United game, the transitions was definitely poor. I think the midfield reminded me of a bit of France. France caught England versus France in the World Cup. Declan Rice was on the island. He was alone. Saka, 1v1, combining with the right back, created a lot of problems. We probably should have been 1-0 up. Martinelli did miss a easy chance. What I think he probably scored 8, 9 out of 10 times in the Prem. He just didn't really look sharp like Saka did. And then they scored 2 goals. I think the night of that game made me kind of laugh because of how important Ten Hag took the game. He took it as a we don't play friendlies type of thing. He literally said we don't play friendlies. So it's a very serious game. So yeah, for them it was very different compared to what it was for us. So it was really the first time we were seeing Rice Havertz. It didn't look great. The left-hand side looked awful in build-up. Tomiyasu Martinelli doesn't make any sense to me. Should never play together. He does it a lot, actually. He did it a couple times last season. Whenever Zinchenko was out for, I think, 12 games or something, he played Tomiyasu there a lot instead of Tierney. And I think when we see Tierney, Gabriel and Martinelli are a lot more comfortable. They're both allowed to be inside a lot more. They're both allowed to roam a lot more. Gabriel doesn't have to be touchline anywhere near as much when we have Tierney. So I think we're just more comfortable with Tierney as a team. And he did play well when he came on. But yeah, I think the United game didn't really look good for whatever that lineup will be. I wanted to ask, do you think we will see Tomiyasu left back?
No.
Because Zinchenko has been out for 3
Not
months.
I think we'll see Timber.
with what we saw.
We'll see Timber before Tomiyasu.
Not with what Timber showed in preseason. That was one of the benefits, actually. I remember in group chats talking about this. Yuri and Timber will look better inverted at the left back than he will at the right back because it stops a lot of the issues that he has when inverting. He's a very interesting prospect. I kind of told a lot of people expect a Caicedo in the works with him, and I see that. I see his ending to be in midfield, but I don't think he's quite ready yet, and he showed a little bit why. He didn't understand the proper ways and when to invert, but his dueling capacity is so strong. He's so quick over the first 5 yards in terms of horizontal agility aspect, but also on the half turn, he's just so sharp. The one thing is when he's on the left, it forces his angles to drive inside. When he's on the right, he's still trying to figure out about where his spacing is arriving into midfield and also receiving into midfield. That's the big thing. At least when he's receiving in terms of being on the left, he naturally opens up to his strong foot there. Once he makes a turn and he's able to face play, he knows where he needs to attack. That's not as clear on the right. And when he's got reduced angles and he's trying to pass into an inverted winger in Saka, he ends up losing a lot of what his natural instinct is, which is to drive, turn, and run. And so he'll look better naturally by having the left angles there. But for me, I don't think Tomiyasu should be a fullback, period, if you want to have that discussion.
He's been a center back for...
Been a center back for as long as we've said on this channel for so long. And
since he signed, we said it on the signing video when he signed. We said that he'll
be a center back the season after we signed him.
Do you remember you both remember what Chris had said by the time he was go on, Chris? You know what you said.
Well, I called him a 31-year-old. What was it? 31-year-old right back.
Yeah,
you move like a 31-year-old right back. Aspilicueta, he should only play centre back in a right centre back in a free or central centre back. He should never really play fullback. He's not productive at all. And last season we saw him play centre back. saw him play fullback. Sorry,
Mm.
he didn't look good at all compared to the
No.
first season where everybody was so happy to see him there. And then this season he doesn't work. And another thing I wanted to ask you on, when Timber plays left back, what do you think the wing pairing should be and who the centre mid should be? Because I think last game it put us in weird positions with him and Rice. It put us in weird positions and stretched the distance between Rice and Smith Rowe way too much. And it killed us in transition, obviously.
I know why
So
you're asking that, because I critiqued it very hard in terms of Rice pulling
I
wide,
remember
and
that.
that was
I know we're not going to speak. Obviously, this was the most recent game, but on Timber, he will play fullback a lot more than he plays centre back. So
Yeah.
Who partners him, left and right?
You
well.
go
I mean,
first.
you've got Ben White's going to start. Period.
Yeah.
End of story. Right, and so that automatically dictates that you want an inverted profile, and Zinchenko's just not ready. And so, in terms of that aspect, I think I preferred what Kiwior did, even though he probably struggled a little bit when he did receive in the center of the pitch. But what I did find that kind of fluid interchange meant that our midfield stayed central. That was the key for me. I find that when Timber was playing, even though he's probably a better dueler and he actually does a little bit better decision making when he's in the middle third than Kiwior, I think what we lost was essentially pushing our central midfielder, Declan Rice, wide in build up. And we had this 2-4 in build up, which was not good. The knock on effect meant that our right central midfielder was drawn far too much in the center, didn't have an ability to overlap. And while that gets mitigated with White a little bit, because White is naturally going to provide more overlap than Tommy, it still meant that our kind of right central midfielder was kind of pushed towards the center and he couldn't kind of combine with the right winger. So for me, it kind of has that debate. I still would slightly prefer Kiwior. I think that he's a little bit safer in terms of the angles, but he doesn't force the midfielders wide when building up when doing it. And he's actually a lot more comfortable that I actually think he could pick up and receive. I loved the one interchange. I think it was Barca, right? When him and Gabriel were starting. And the one thing that I loved was the fact that he would receive as a center back, but then defend left back. I thought that meant the midfield would stay in the middle third, but B, it kind of maximize the strengths and weaknesses of Gabriel and Kiwior, respectively. And so for me, that was probably the best that I've seen that role in terms of a build-up sense and not forcing our midfield wide. But I will say, I think Yuri and Timber is a stronger dueler, and we're facing Man City. So I think my question would probably change a little bit depending on the opponent. Like I'd probably want, probably want a Kiwior to start with maybe a Man City just to test out that 4 center back line. It's a really strong opponent. But then I have no problem with Yuri and Timber, for example, operating in Forest, where I think that maybe we can experiment by having a little bit more width in our midfield. But then I wouldn't force Declan Rice to do that role again. I would ask somebody else to do it. I just think it was a mistake. Trossard. I would have Trossard in there. And if you're asking a midfielder to be wide and that's the rule that you're giving, then
Emil.
Provide a midfielder that's able to do that. And that's not Havertz either, by the way. Who was the best player in preseason to do that role? Trossard. And he gave the best performance of that role with Emil Smith-Rowe and Kieran Tierney as the pod. So you learned that. Pair that together. If you're not going to do that role and you're going to have somebody in the center of the pitch, then Declan Rice all day, every day. But it makes no sense having basically Declan Rice play wide as a wing fielder, quote unquote. It just makes no sense to me.
If anyone didn't realize, by the way, it was a leading question for George to continue to talk about. Just
I think a lot of people have realized over the past year and a half or almost 2 years now that half of our questions
for your leading questions, Chris.
Half the question we put out here is just leading into George to go into a rant. So if you don't know, you do know now. But yeah, the question in terms of who we'd start, if you're starting Timber, just think of it this way: the way he's footed is not footed to go receive back foot wide and hit the wide channel. He's most likely going to hit his back foot and go central. The angles open up to him. His body orientation opens up into the center of the pitch. It's not opening up to go down the wing. So he's most likely going to go centrally. And that means your central midfielder would have to pull wide. So Declan will probably pull wide, like George said. So when you think about that, then the question is, do you want, when you get into that position, you need someone to combine with, because Declan will, if it will obviously rotate in, you need someone to rotate out. So I would trust, as George said, Trossard and Emile to do that. Personally, I think the starting lineup we'll cover the Community Shield, I think, on tomorrow. But for me, the actual lineup for that, I think our front line should be Emile, Trossard, and Saka. I think that should be the way we go. But that's going into tomorrow. In terms of what happened in preseason, when we had that Emile, Trossard, and Kieran pod, as George likes to say, what happened is that we got the best functionality out of all three of them, and they combined very well, and they got into positions where you could actually see them trying to get into actions in the final third and being productive, as well as being a bit more conservative in defensive options. So I think the best way to think of things is, I think, just making sure that you get the best out of the 11 players on the pitch. And I think with Jesus out, do I want to see? I liked what Eddie did on Sunday, and we'll get into that. We'll get into that in the when we talk about the Emirates Cup. But I think the main thing is to move on to the United game, and I think we're going to talk a lot about the spaces in transition, and I think that's the main talking point of that. So when we talk about what happened there, I think the main thing that George has already intimated is the distances. The distances in midfield, I think Havertz hadn't really adapted to. And Mikel intimated to it after the game, hadn't really adapted to that left centre midfield role. No one had really played together. The actual relationships on the pitch hadn't formed really, and they hadn't really trained together that much. So I think you're looking at a situation where now you're going to see, as the season rolls on, that Rice, Odegaard, Havertz trio could work against a more lower block team. You can see, I think people will start to have a lot more cameo appearances. The guy like Trossard can come into that left central midfield role. Emile can come at that left central midfield role. And I think that's the main thing. But for me, you can't have those distances, especially against a potent transition team like United. It's just not going to work.
Well, for me though, like, why did the system not work? Why was there a structural impasse there? And I think you have to look at the starting lineup, mate. Like, look at that left-hand side. Tomiyasu left back to Gabriel. Big mistake. You've got a big center back that naturally opens to the right, and you've got Gabriel who isn't comfortable opening to his right. So immediately central progression got stifled because they both wanted to pass back to each other. Declan recognizes this and he drops, and boom, automatically he's out of midfield, and so he's not in the progressive area that we want him to be as an anchor. It's constantly there. Then you've got Kai Havertz and Martinelli. These are two big space runners. These are two space invaders. Why are we pairing them to do the same role? Kai Havertz himself, while he can drop at points to kind of help out in terms of facilitate, he wants to crash the box. He wants to facilitate things within the 18-yard box, and he wants to be able to find pocket space, but not be a primary creator. That's what he wants. Martinelli wants the space in order to be a 1v1 demon, and he wants to take people on and cheat to the middle, and he wants to attack space in the middle of the park. I've mentioned attacking space now to describe both of their roles, and that's redundancy. So that's why that doesn't work. And then when you start to look at the pod, Emile Smith-Rowe and Trossard and Kieran Tierney, why does that work? Well, one, Kieran offers the width naturally there, and he doesn't kind of mix in the spaces because Trossard's perfectly capable of dropping to build up and receiving on the half turn, which, by the way, he did. And that's why it works so beautifully. Emile, for as much as I love him as an 8, he's not somebody that loves to pick up off the center backs. He can do it, no problem, but he doesn't love doing that. And so when you've got a player that's so technically secure like Trossard able to do that, it leaves Emile able to be a little bit higher up the pitch, and he can go and attack spaces himself. So the chemistry there fit. The chemistry on the left-hand side never fit in the starting lineup, and that's why, for me, there was such an issue. And I think that when you have a look at, Havertz, he didn't just have a little bit of a better cameo in the recent game, is that I think it was a little bit more to do with balance as opposed to basically him being a really poor guy. And so for me, I was just frustrated by Mikel. I think that, again, Gabriel central center back in this 3 was kind of a very poor idea for me. I did not like that. And of course, Yuri and Timber in this game had trouble inverting. Like, let's call it how it is. So, when Declan was kind of cheating towards the left, Yuri and Timber maintained his position. He needed to go a lot more central, which he didn't do. And so that left a huge gap in the middle of the park, a huge U-shaped. And if you end up looking at the passing networks, I don't know if we can put it up, but I don't
There's
think
like
we got
there's
that
something like
graphic,
there's a
but
ridiculously small amount of passes in the central areas, isn't there?
yeah,
If I remember correctly.
there was something like, if I
8
remember
passes or
correctly,
something.
there was only one passing combination between Havertz and Odegaard. I
Yeah.
think there was only 4 passing combinations between Havertz and Declan Rice, and I think there was only 2 passing combinations between Yuri and Timber and Martin Odegaard. All in all, our entire midfield combined for less than 10 total passing combinations. And
Yeah.
so, look,
The one thing that
doing
worried me, do you not think that, not worried, but like was slightly disappointing, was I thought maybe we'd see a lot more switches. I think that was the main thing in this preseason. I wanted to see that Rice to Saka switch a couple of times, and I didn't really get to see that. But I
I mean,
think
you
there's a
saw it
lot
to
of
the Fabio Vieira. If Saka was
yeah,
playing, against the Monaco, you'd end up seeing it. But I think the issues that we had in the middle of the park was kind of the reason why maybe this United game struggled a bit, you know. But again, that for me was the biggest issue with United, and it wasn't even just a one-person thing. There was just a lot of structural issues. I don't know what Chris thought, but like for me, it was just a
yeah.
structural breakdown. So it was very tough to take away stuff.
Yeah, I think United was a.
Nashville's been listening to my left central midfielder shouts, by the way.
Yeah, United was a weird game. I think you guys have really spoken about everything, really. The second half did look a lot better than the first half. But at that point, it really was too late to really change the game. The score didn't really matter. We lost on pens as well. I wish we won on pens so I could change the narrative that we won the game. But apart from that, like, it was early stages. First time we'll ever see it. It's not. I don't think it's the last time we. I don't think it's the last time we see that combination. That midfield, I think we'll see it more going along throughout the season, and hopefully he does manage it better. Hopefully he does put different players in different positions, and doesn't put Tomiyasu there to completely change from what he wanted to do from the start. Anyways, he wanted to see Rice central. We all did. So why put Tomiyasu there?
The only way,
put him in a position where he has to drop. That's my main question to Arteta.
No, the other thing is with Tommy is, why are you asking him to overlap? He's not an overlapper. Like he stays back too much, and he's like, if you remember that United game, he was trying to hug the touchline, and he was trying to hit that. Why would you not just play Coutinho the entire game? That's the question.
Well, I would like this kind of question adjust to it. Like I'm going to revert it back to even Magzinho. Maybe I'm butchering your name, mate, but sorry. But ask yourself, what is Martinelli? And in terms of pairing Kai Havertz, you shouldn't be asking how to pair Havertz and Nelly. You should be asking, what does Martinelli need to thrive in that space? Why is it that we saw, Trossard work really well on that kind of pod with Emile Smith-Rowe, who does like to attack space, a little bit more ball retention as a winger, but generally like to attack space. And it's because I've had this theory. I believe you need to look at your wingers, you need to maximize the balance. And look at on the right. Bukayo Saka is somebody that is a ball to feet winger, fundamentally. He's a very creative winger. So he can work with somebody like a Martin Odegaard, who himself likes it ball to feet. But you maximize him with a space invader like Kai Havertz, like Emile Smith-Rowe, these people that provide dynamic overlaps themselves. They create a much more fundamental chemistry with that type of winger. Martinelli, if you look at some of the snippets, whenever Martin Odegaard has opened left and released Martinelli, there's a huge potential for that relationship. And that's because Martinelli himself is a big space runner. Kai Havertz is a big space runner. When you have two players that want to run into the same spaces as each other, you're going to get a redundancy. By the way, this applies to Eddie and Kedia. This is why those two don't have the best of chemistry together. When you look at kind of a Jesus complement to Martinelli, that's also why that works a little bit more. Jesus is more ball to feet. Nelly is more of the off the ball runner. So what I believe that we have to do is we need to start to see ideas about us flipping some of these dynamics in terms of making sure that a ball dominant central midfielder is paired with a big space runner, and then vice versa, making sure that when we have a different type of striker, let's say, so if Eddie is going to start, you need to have a lot more ball retention wingers to kind of supplement it, because he's not somebody that is, while he's very good back to goal, he's not somebody that likes to participate in pockets and offer himself as a +1 in build-up. Trossard does that, Jesus does that, but that's not the profile of striker that Eddie Nketiah is. So we just need to kind of balance out these pods a little bit more. And I think that's what we would do with, Martinelli and Havertz.
Yeah, Chris, thoughts on the pairing of Martinelli and Havertz, and how do we get the best out of both?
And maybe
And this question as well.
Why do you think Tet hasn't? Because he's stubborn. Why he tries something and tries something and tries something till it costs us enough for him to realize, okay, let me give in and do what is necessary. Because, for example, when Tierney got into 2 seasons ago, he tried and tried and tried till West Brom. Then he put Saka left back. He does stuff like that consistently. Last season, he tried and tried and tried. Then he put Partey right back. Like he does these things consistently and consistently. Then he puts Kyrgios centre back. He does these things, and it will take time. Maybe we probably will see them flip this season, and a lot of people won't be happy about it. Then we'll see Odegaard get an assist first time, ball in between the right back
Like
and
Leeds.
Martinelli 2 touches and he puts it in the bottom corner. Martinelli was in for that all game, like all of last game. No one played the pass. That will happen. He will score, and then everyone will say, "Why didn't we do this sooner?" And George will say, "See, I told you. See, I told you. See, I told you." So it is something that will
It's the cycle of life, isn't it, Chris?
Arteta is a very stubborn coach, I think. How do we get Martinelli and Havertz to work? I don't think it will ever be 100% efficient, ever be 100% successful. I think Martinelli will always want to come closer to the goal, and Havertz will always want to go closer to the goal. So if they're both trying to go towards the goal, I think maybe
one will have to sacrifice, right? Like if both are going to be on the same side, one will have to sacrifice their natural
instinct. Go out
instinct.
wide. One will have to drop deep or stay touchline, and I don't think either wants to do that. Both of them want to. Martinelli wants to run with the ball into the box, and Havertz wants to run. Whilst Martinelli's running with the ball, Havertz wants to enter the box for a cutback, or Martinelli misses and Havertz gets the rebound. That's what Havertz wants. So I'm not sure how we balance that on the left-hand side. I'm not sure it'll ever be 100% efficient. I don't see a way we make that 100% efficient, but it will be. We will continue to see it. Hopefully, it's good enough at the start of the season for us to have success. I don't want to see it versus Man City.
And this can maybe be like a good transition, by the way, to Barca, because I want to answer this question because I believe I'm going to, again, throw the question back at the viewer here, mate. Why did we see more rotation with Barca? And let's look at the starting lineup along the left-hand side once again. Urian Timber, somebody who, again, the differences between him and Tommy is even though that he hasn't inverted perfectly, he can invert much better. But then you still got Kai Havertz. And who do you have as a left wing, by the way? Pay very good attention. Is it a Martinelli or is it another ball retention player? It was a ball retention player in Trossard. And so when you start to talk about why was it that people were rotating a bit better in terms of Barca, the balance mate was better. Look at the left wings and look at the central midfield pairings, okay? We know the Martin Odegaard Bukayo Saka partnership works. I still believe that if you were to kind of switch these dynamics, you'd see a little bit more chemistry, by the way, with a Kai or even an Emile Smith-Rowe. But we know that works on that side. Look at the left. Naturally, you've got your central midfielder who is the space invader, somebody who likes to run into those big spaces. And then you've got Trossard who is able to fill in and come deeper and fill in those tight spaces and allow the space for Kai Havertz to run into. If that was Martinelli, which is what we saw, by the way, against United, we saw that didn't work. That, for me, is kind of the answer within your own question there. And so, look, different roles will be asked of everybody, but you need to have a certain amount of chemistry. And for me, it kind of goes back to this one post that I really had on Twitter that when I was talking about pods and individuals, somebody had asked about kind of the makeup of our attack and essentially have, you've got 5 players in attack and you've got 5 players in defense. But I really talked about kind of my personal favorite, which is having a ball carrying progressor that's capable between the lines. I call that pocket play. That could be a Martin Odegaard. That could be an Emile Smith-Rowe. It could be a Trossard. It could be even a Reece Nelson. These kind of players that are ball retention experts. You need to pair that with a dynamic overlap to stretch a back line. That could be a Ben White. That could be a Martinelli. That could be any type of player that likes to run with big spaces. That could be Kai Havertz. Again, These are the type of players, but you need to pair them on the same side. You can't have them doing the same thing. And that creates no angle bias in possession. Then out of possession, you need to combine these qualities of having second ball control. You also need to combine them being springy kind of to markers out wide with controlled aggression. If you have those things, you get a balanced pod. So when I start to look at the Barca lineup, let's apply those principles, by the way. Leandro Trossard, what would you categorize him as? A ball-carrying progressor that has excellent pocket play. What would you categorize Kai Havertz as? A dynamic overlap option. So that's why that partnership works. When I look at kind of a United, what was the United lineup, by the way? Martinelli and Kai Havertz. Can you describe pocket play and a ball-carrying progressor that's good in tight spaces, that can find people between the lines for either of those two people? Not really. It's not their instinct. So
I have something to help illustrate this. So basically, if we go to United, we're talking about Trossard, not Trossard, Martinelli and Havertz, and you look at it, and you see they're very close together, and they're trying to invade the same pocket of space. Whereas if you look at Trossard, it's a different situation, and you're really looking at having someone to receive a bit deeper, providing a bit more width, having that ball progression, and the roles fit better. So I just think that's a easier way to visualize it, because if you have, for example, if you have the two people invading the same space, as you said, big space runners that like to hit the same areas,
there's a
and
redundancy in roles.
it's a redundancy, and not just a redundancy, a lack of spacing as well. Like, you're having too many people crowd the back post. You're not having someone run centrally. I mean, obviously you're striking run centrally, but the point is you're not really attacking every lane possible. You're really just attacking two lanes, your striker and the back post, if you're to have a right half space cross. But if you're having someone basically, as in terms of a Trossard can retain the ball. If you're going to have a cross, he can kind of lurk from deep instead of coming in and trying to make those darting runs into the back post. He can kind of sneak in and find those third man runs that Odegaard he did last season. So I think that's the best way to describe it. You're creating a bit more space for everyone, and you're also attacking. You're creating more problems for the defensive back line as well, because you're attacking more space in terms of the actual physical space you occupy as well.
Well, I mean, to answer the question about having Trossard 9, unfortunately, but you're still pairing Martinelli and Kai Havertz together. Even if Trossard's going to be the 9, so to speak, he would have to consistently cheat left to make that work and effectively be a left central midfielder. And you'd in fact have Havertz
You'd have
as the 9.
You'd have to rotate in and out, basically, for Trossard and Havertz.
Yeah, like, and how it would work, right? And look, Havertz should not be paired on the same side as Martinelli as the winger, whether that's in a 9 capacity or whether that's in a central midfielder capacity. They both want to arrive in the same spaces. They're both final third players. Trossard works because he's a complement that can receive deep. None of Martinelli and Havertz want to do that. So you solve one of those problems, but you're not solving the in possession issue in the final third. That's the issue. Trossard will always be a solution because he is a Swiss Army knife player. He comes in and he does the role that he's needed to do. He's complete and utter efficiency.
Selfless.
Yeah, he's very selfless. And so he's able to solve problems there. But the one thing that you're not solving for me is kind of in that false 9. Really, what you want to do, you have to decide between yourself on that side, what's more important, Martinelli off the ball or Kai Havertz off the ball. Now, if you want to include all of these people, you would probably want to talk about a diamond midfield. And I knew that this was coming because you were going to say, how will
bring up the
Kai
picture.
Havertz? And we kind of alluded to it in previous podcasts. But again, this is how I see that Kai Havertz will be used with Mikel. Look at him as the number 10 in terms of a tip of the diamond. So we've been playing a box midfield for a while. And again, this isn't much of a difference. Instead of having a flat box, which is just a 2-2, you just have somebody drop in a little bit more. And it's more of an asymmetrical box, which is fancy terms for saying diamond, guys. It's a diamond midfield. And so then what you end up seeing when this is kind of all shrunk up the pitch and kind of our 3-2-5, it's really, really simple. You've got your Kai Havertz and you've got your Declan Rice kind of pivot, and you've got obviously Gabriel, Saliba, and Ben White as your back 3 down there. The benefits of having your Odegaard and your Kai Havertz just in these half spaces is that they're able to interchange and they're able to pair And the one big benefit, by the way, is say you've got a Martinelli on the left here. I, again, would like to pair a Martin Odegaard on that side because that solves the ball dominant portion that I've been talking about. And that really helps a big space runner there. And then Kai Havertz can fill in the spaces that, Bukayo Saka would like to do in terms of dynamic overlaps. It still leaves him free to crash the box. And by the way, this formation still allows us to play 4-4-2. The only issue is you would just make the libero, which is Saliba, be man-to-man marking, and it would push everybody up. So, ironically,
It's
they're not. The
it's
irony
mine.
is it's current, but it's the best way that I see us able to fit everybody. If you're forcing me to have Havertz in the team, that's
The OGs
essentially it.
know. The OGs know. They know. The OGs know that's my formation.
Sadly, dead formation.
Would
Oh,
you give Balogun a go,
No.
even though he's basically out the door?
Not us. Would Arteta give Balogun? It doesn't
No.
matter.
It doesn't matter what we do. I don't think Arteta would either. I think given if he's been injured and he's not played any minutes, I don't see him just chucking him out there. If he's not injured and he's forcing a move, I don't think he chucks him out there either.
Injured.
If he's not injured, and he's playing about, if he's playing about, then Mikel's not going to play him. It's that simple. You commit to this. You commit to the principles of the squad. It's that simple.
He played well the first 2 games, then disappeared. He got his American highlights, American interviews, played in Nuremberg, and then disappeared. So, I don't know what he's been doing. So,
but I think all in all, we should probably end on Monaco because that was an interesting game.
It's a fun game.
No, I was frustrated. I'm not even gonna lie. There was another.
You
it was
weren't
another
there.
time.
That's why.
Well, yeah, maybe, but still, it was just another instance where
I had a
Mikel was
prime,
kind of
right? It was a fun time.
It was
at half time. There were so many opinions just flowing about Vieira's been rubbish.
Yeah. That was my favorite one.
Declan Rice looks rubbish. Eddie looks good. I thought Eddie had a good game as captain. I thought Eddie had a very good game as captain. Timber looked good. I just think the partnership, Rice and Partey, was good to see. It wasn't the way I wanted to see it.
There were times that Partey was dropping too much for me. I mean, that's just what I saw. I haven't watched it back yet. I felt like he was dropping. He's trying to do the Jorginho Register role too much, like dropping into the centre back.
Why?
I think it's the left centre mid.
You know why?
Partnership right back. The left back, left centre mid, and left back.
You know why? Because of the way thingy inverted. Because of how Timber inverted, it forces Partey to drop, and then Declan forces wide.
But Timber being inverted with the right back not overlapping didn't make sense, which is why first half people were saying Vieira looked rubbish. But for me, considering the thinking, Vieira is alone, he's playing Saka's role, which not many right wingers in the world, let alone at Arsenal, should be asked to do. I think he played well considering what he had to do. I think the time where Timber switched was probably the best period we had offensively in the game before the subs. When Timber switched, we were creating a lot. We almost scored from a Timber overlap. I think the left-hand side didn't make much sense. The transition was too easy from one of them. They dominated us in the midfield. And they didn't have the greatest midfield, but they've got great PMP in the midfield. So when you give them...
And everybody wanted to buy Fofana after
Yusuf
the game.
Fofana, yeah, he dominated the midfield.
I don't even want to know what the GC was like during that game.
Yeah,
I don't
but
even want to know.
Rice was just too far wide. He was playing left mid. He combined with Martinelli well, which just shows the quality of player he is, but he should never be asked to play 1-2s in the touchline and overlap around the right back and play crosses with his left foot.
No.
The frustrating.
He can do it though. That's the mad thing.
Look, the frustrating part between all of this, right, is I talked about kind of the Declan Rice peeling wide, so I won't go back into that. But I thought Eddie had a really great movement. Vieira, by the way, was really sharp under contact. He had one of the better games of everybody, despite the timeline not really watching. I think he would have benefited from obviously a Ben White overlap. It's frustrating, but I think he is convinced that Timber's starting personally. And he's made that decision, which is why Timber's had so many minutes this preseason. That's the one thing that I did take away in general. I really hope he's learned that Tomiyasu is not a fullback. We've now got 2 different samples and 2 different zones of the pitch that show the exact same issues with Tommy And it's not a criticism on him, by the way. It's just what his natural instinct is to do. And by the way, I just wonder whether or not looking at this game, we kind of got an idea of how the number 9 conundrum will happen with Jesus. I think that's the biggest thing that I'll probably ask you guys, and I'll throw it to you. Not only should Kieran Tierney have started in this game, but that's another issue. Who do you think should be the primary replacement for, I guess, Gabby Jesus? Assuming that, again, Martinelli's going to start for me. Like, I kind of disagree with you, Kern. I don't think that Emil will start with City.
No, I don't think he will. That's what I want.
Oh no, I wouldn't even want that personally. Like, what's your front three?
I want the Tierney.
So before I answer, what's the front three? What are we assuming the midfielders?
Declan Rice and Thomas Partey. I don't
Rice,
think that.
Ødegaard.
Yeah.
No Havertz.
Trossard.
You can do whatever you want, but just Declan Rice and Partey for me are like non-negotiables. And then we know we're back line.
And let me be clear: are we doing what we want or what we think is going to happen?
You can do whatever you want.
No,
you can do both.
Define the question.
Just answer both.
Answer both. Yeah, okay. Answer both.
I don't know. I think if Martinelli starts, right, then we can't play Havertz. It's that simple. If Ødegaard's playing, unless we switch the roles or play Kai in the 10 in the free role.
The midfield is Partey, Rice, and
Rice, Ødegaard, right?
What's your front?
And keep in mind, we're facing City, which I'm leading with transitions is going to be an issue, and we need a focal point, which maybe should help the answer.
No, I don't want to say it. You say I don't want to say it because I don't. Because I'm going to say Havertz. I'm going to say Havertz because of the.
You want him to play up top as a 9?
No, I want us to play 3-4-3. I don't want to play up top as a 9. I want to play him diamond.
You're saying the midfield won't be right. You don't want the midfield to be Rice, Partey, Ødegaard.
I want the all 4 to be. I want Rice, Partey, Ødegaard, and Havertz in a 4. That's what I want. I don't want.
You want the 3-4-3.
I want the 3-4-3. I don't want the.
And who's the 9?
What's your full 11 if we do that?
Okay, so Ramsdale, Gabriel, Saliba, and then White, and then Rice, Partey, Ødegaard, Havertz, and then I'm going with Eddie, Martinelli, and Saka. That's what I want.
So, okay. So you have no Timber.
I have no Timber.
No Tierney, none of that.
No.
Okay. That's what you want.
I don't even have Trossard. Let's put it that way.
That's what you want, yeah. So what do you think happens then?
I think we do Havertz left centre mid. I then think that I don't know if we do Trossard. I think we do Eddie, Martinelli, Eddie, and Saka.
So you think we do? So who's the DM?
Rice. No, Partey and Rice. Rice is the left centre mid. Sorry, you're right. Yeah.
No, so say the 11 for that one then.
So Ramsdale, and then it will be Timber, Gabriel, Saliba, and White, Rice, Partey, and Havertz. Rice, Partey, and Ødegaard, and then Martinelli, Eddie, and Saka.
Okay.
So the thing is, here you go, Chris, because I have different lineups for Forest and City personally.
For City, we're talking for City, yeah.
Yeah, we're talking for City, yeah.
Yeah.
I think Nketiah starts. I think every time versus City, when you don't give Ruben Diaz a focal point, I think you can make the game a bit easier for him. I think for me, you have to pin someone on him, make him make fouls. They can contest someone for really 90 minutes.
Yeah,
I haven't looked at City much pre-season, but I know Ruben Diaz as a player, and he's looked a lot worse when you pin someone on him. You give someone to run the channels like Eddie. Eddie did have success when he played them at Emirates, and I do prefer having someone I can trust, or we can trust somewhat to receive if our build-up is lacking, as it did sometimes versus City's press. The outball is there with him. With Trossard, it isn't there anywhere near as much. That long,
which is why I think we'll see Eddie. I don't think we'll see Trossard.
And I do not want Tomiyasu right back. I want Ben White right back.
He will be.
I need Rice to be in midfield. I really do need to see Rice Partey in midfield, and probably the most solid I think we could ever be. I don't really see us losing if Rice and Partey start together in midfield. Not versus how they played versus Monaco. I don't really see how we lose. We could lose, but I don't really see how we do lose with that. But yeah, so I think Rice, Partey, Odegaard, Saka, and Nketiah, Martinelli.
It's a weird one, right? Because Trossard is obviously the most stylistic complement to Jesus. I just don't think that against City with more transitions, I alluded to it earlier in my question, Eddie Nketiah for me starts. I think it was a big thing to give him the captaincy armband.
You know why I struggled with that question? Let me just quickly, before you say that, the reason why I struggled with the question, because I thought if we do long ball to Havertz and knockdowns, you know what I mean?
I don't think he's strong under contact.
He's not strong enough. That's the thing. But the thing is, when you said that, that was the first thing that came in my head. I was thinking, or maybe you do knockdowns. But no, you're right. It is Eddie, and that's because I was second guessing myself. I was like, does he mean Havertz? Does he mean Eddie? No, you're right. It is Eddie.
It's Eddie for the simple fact that transitions are going to be a bigger focus on the game, and I think it's incredibly harsh because again, I've said Trossard was our best player in preseason, and so he's going to feel incredibly harsh to do that. It's just not the game for him. And by the way, it would be unfair to use him as an outlet, by the way, against Ruben Diaz, John Stones, long balls.
I will say is when it comes to Wembley, when it comes to like just emotionally big games, you do want Kai Havertz on the pitch.
I personally
disagree. I think the narrative of him in big games is overblown.
Very. And I think that
it obviously, like with most narratives, there is obviously a nugget of truth in a massive oversea of Twitter hype. I mean, you look at the Carabao Cup final, you look at the Champions League final. He turns up in games.
Did he though? The Champions League final, he was horrible, bar the final action.
I don't think so.
I just think personally, like knowing what City have and knowing Ruben Diaz will start. Like I know who he is.
You need somebody to battle, right? Like
can you do Kai Havertz and Eddie Nketiah together?
Yeah, of course you can.
But not with Martinelli.
Not with Martinelli. That's the problem.
But I think with Ruben Diaz as a player, you can't take away the battle. You give him too much time to think, to just read from a distance. You have to take away like in boxing. I don't want to use boxing, but you have to take away the space he can see. You have to take away his focus on the whole thing. You have to make him focus on one battle. Similar thing to Holding, but you just have to make him focus on one battle. And I think Nketiah is our best way to do that. And
it's just a matter of transitions.
We won't have the ball as much anyways.
It's going to be a matter of transitions for me.
Need to lump the ball up.
Yeah. We're going to need somebody to fight in the channels for me. And so Eddie's going to be able to do that. And I think that the captaincy was a huge thing. And by the way, I think the captaincy was a move by Mikel saying, I want you to stay. And despite there being a lot of commotion about potentially him leaving, and I've always said Eddie could be a surprise sale. I don't rule it out, but I know Mikel doesn't want to do that. He doesn't want to lose Eddie. And I think that Eddie performs best when he knows he's the guy. And we just found out that, Jesus is out for the next couple of weeks. He's going to guarantee start, and Eddie does that really well. So for me, I'd also rather Kai Havertz come on in a game like this against Manchester City with space. I don't like the very first dueling ability. Like, let us deal with that game state and then allow him to come in when there's pockets and when there's space for him to exploit.
There's one more thing. Sorry. We can't leave the spaces. KDB, we can't leave the spaces. We have to keep the spaces.
Well, who's a better presser?
This is the thing. So, if you think about it's not just the better pressure, but the better. We have to implement that 4-5-1 block that we saw against the MLS All Stars. We can't go to that 4-4-2 with the Rice and Odegaard at the pivot. It just won't work. Otherwise, you do Odegaard and Rice. Odegaard and Partey. Rice and Partey. Jesus Christ, Rice and Partey in the pivot in the block, or you play 4-5-1. You can't do 4-4-2 or Rice Odegaard.
Versus Barca was more of a 4-on-4-on, I think.
Yeah, it was.
We looked a lot more comfortable. Well, I think the team looked a lot more comfortable. The Partey switching with Odegaard.
Oh no, he has. He's terminated his way back into an
Arsenal. He's been training. He's been back since that.
He's terminated his way. He saw the Emirates logos.
I don't remember the last time he was unfit against us, but yeah, those types of players will play. I haven't watched City much. Before we do go, I haven't watched City much this preseason. Have you guys watched any?
No, I haven't watched City. I've watched more Chelsea than City. I'm not going to lie to you.
Well,
what do you expect from City then?
Well, we could probably
I mean,
look.
we'll
I
We'll
don't.
go
talk
into
about
that
this
tomorrow, but
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll go into the lineups tomorrow, so I'll save that. But maybe we can just talk about City's season and off season in general. Look, I would be worried. I'm not even just saying this as a rival fan. Look at the amount of people that they're potentially losing, and I still think Kyle Walker has a very high tendency to leave.
Bernardo.
Bernardo
Bernardo
Silva has another
Silva.
high tendency to leave, and so the one issue that I've got is they've got a lot of top leaders that have won a lot for their club leaving.
I mean, what
Could
the
have been-
argument for them is what they've said, and I've talked to a couple of them. They said their depth is not quantitative but qualitative, as in their backups are, high quality. They haven't got a lot of them,
Yeah.
but they have, a lot of quality in the backups. And I don't even think that's true. Like, I don't even know what their starting right wing is. Who is their starting right wing? Is it Foden? Like,
Foden
what
or
are they doing?
Alvarez, I imagine.
It's just like
Foden, probably.
Foden,
right?
yeah.
Or Bernardo Silva. Like,
But we don't even know if he's going to be there.
no, he'll be there for the Community Shield. But like,
Hmm.
the issue is again, I don't think that you take a lot from the preseason results from them, but I am looking at their squad and just fundamentally they've lost quite a bit of their leadership potential. And Riyad Mahrez was a huge miss for me. I don't think that they've got a true 1v1 winger in their squad right now. Grealish for me is more of somebody that's a ball retention kind of expert, and I think
They've
they
lost
don't
late
have.
runs into the box with Gundogan as well.
Yeah, they've lost that. But I
Kovacic
think
will play a
Gundogan
different.
was a huge band-aid in more ways than one. It wasn't even just runs into the box. It was also in terms of build-up, offering a second release valve, let alone losing Silva, by the way. They lose Bernardo Silva. I struggle to see what they will do as a replacement in time with a month left to really push on. And so I think a lot depends on if Bernardo Silva leaves, because I've already considered Gavardiol in, and I've already considered them wanting to recruit a winger. But any winger that they recruit is fundamentally not going to be at the same level as a Riyad Mahrez, so they're already weaker in my sense from that aspect.
Could you see, and this is before we do go, this is the last thing I'm going to talk about. Could you see us to revert back to our build right, attack left, output left dynamics that we had early in Mikel's tenure?
Not necessarily that order. I mean, I think that we'll do that non-negotiable no matter what. Like, we'll always build to one side and attack space far side. Like, we'll overload one side, quick switch out to the underloaded side and attack. I don't think that has to be right to left. It can
I think
be
it
either
is
or.
right to left, though. Do you not think? That's the question.
Well, it's right to left because, well, no, not really.
I don't think it's right to left. I just think the player who does the big switch is Saliba.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now we have Declan
Rice.
Rice who can do it.
Yeah.
So there's a left to right option that boom opens
I
up.
just think that the creators are more on the right side with Ødegaard and Saka together.
Yeah, but think about
hitting
it,
that
mate.
right,
Like,
hitting the back post cross to
think about
Martinelli
it.
or
Well,
Havertz.
think about
or
it. You've
whoever.
got now Declan Rice who can make that switch, and you've got Ben White and Bukayo Saka that are more than capable of eating that.
And Rice did it plenty yesterday.
Yeah.
So it is something that we'll see regularly. And it's a dynamic that last season we didn't really ask that question, did we? So
No.
it is something that it's good.
And we
that there's
couldn't.
more.
We theorized Kiwior was probably the only one that was able to consistently do it, and he was new to the team. So we don't consistently have that option. Now that we have it, I expected a lot more. And by the way, I think that Bukayo Saka being somebody that's more involved, getting inside and having Ben overlap a bit more is something that's going to be dangerous for us moving forward. So look, I'm excited. We'll talk about the Community Shield a little bit more tomorrow.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about tomorrow.
Overall,
we're going to talk tomorrow. Yeah.
Overall, I think Manchester City are one of the more interesting clubs right now in terms
We'll
of
talk about
transition.
every team in depth more when we do our predictions.
There was someone on Twitter saying there's no team that looks ready for the season. Everyone kind of looks like a bit like they're just kind of figuring out what to do with their squads, etc., etc. I can't remember who it was, but
this is what it's for, no?
Yeah.
Like, imagine going straight into the season off the back of last season with all the new players and not being able. So no one, even when you do look great in preseason, and we did look great last year, we went into the season firing first 19.
I felt like, but the thing is with last season though, like we had Jesus and Zinchenko who knew the system already, and there wasn't really anyone kind of having to get to grips or we're trying to adapt. Like we have two players or even all three that are trying to adapt to new roles, and they're getting to grips with things.
More.
Yeah, potentially more.
Look, the one thing that I'll say to kind of cap off is in anticipation for the Community Shield, I'd like to see Mikel settle on a more representative 11 that he wants for the start of the season. we've gone through our experimentation phase, and I think it's been good to experiment. But in anticipation for learning about a squad, that's a benefit. But now I kind of want the plan A to happen for a full 90, especially before Forest. So a big thing for me is going to be looking at what we do as a benchmark for the season. And I do think this is very important, by the way. The first time that we face City, this isn't a throwaway thing. This is the first mark for the title,
It's
guys.
it's a marker for the rest of the season for sure.
Yeah,
We need to excise some ghosts
I
like
actually
we did
can't
against
wait.
Palace in the beginning of last
me
season.
too. And personally, I learned so much from these games. I think these two aren't able to make a low competitive game. They're just impossibly not. So
And
it's
you
going
just
to be a
know
high level.
Mikel's seething from losing out to Pep. You just know it. You know that
Well, the
he
Pep
squad
just doesn't
is,
want to
mate.
lose to him, does he?
Yeah, well, the squad is too, guys. Like, I mean, at the end of the day, let's have it
You
right.
saw the
We've
Aaron
been
Ramsdale post.
slapped.
They were all
We've been
all
slapped
hurting.
every time that we face them, and we've been treated like a little brother. And it's not right. I think we took huge steps last season. I think we had probably one of the best performances that City's ever faced against the team last season. But it is a huge hurdle that we need to draw first blood on. Now, again, if we lose, I don't think the season's over, and that means that the title's gone. But at the same token, we need to take this opportunity as a way to lay a marker.
We have conceded
All right,
13 goals to them.
I mean, one before we go, one last thought to sum up preseason, and then George, you can dial us out. I think for me, then we'll go Chris and then George. For me, I think the main thing was experimentation, as George mentioned. I think that's the main theme of the preseason. I think we've seen some really nice things, some kind of really worrying things as well. But at the end of the day, you're looking at, I'd rather these sort of experimentations happen in preseason now. So yeah, that's the main thing I've taken away from it. And I'm happy to see just see some football again and see some the thing we've wanted for the past 2 years happen and get him into the team. So that was nice. Seeing it at the Emirates yesterday was nice. So yeah, that's the main thing I would take away. Chris?
Yeah, I think preseason is what would I say about preseason? Maybe Mikel's learned in some ways to use the squad more. Last season we didn't see the squad used as much. The team is just a different energy. We're going on to a kind of a bounce back, actually. Losing the league in that way. The team motto, the team plan is different. We're going for the league. We're going for the Champions League. It's not like last season where it's all a surprise after the World Cup. Oh, we have 50 points. What can we do from here? It is, you have to compete now or you failed. The energy was different from the first game. The energy is different where it's 1-1 versus Monaco in the 85th minute and their players are all smiling because they're not losing. So it's just a very different energy to what the players were. The squad is bigger. The squad is better. Losing Xhaka was not nice, but we've replaced with probably one of the best replacement we could get in that mode, Declan Rice. So I'm happy with what we've done, and I think we have to start firing us. I don't think we can do as well as we started last season, but hopefully we do start well on all fronts, not just the Prem.
Yeah, I mean, last thing before George goes, because I forgot to, I think we all forgot to mention it. Aaron Ramsdale saved a penalty. I think that's a major handicap that he's suffered from the fan base in terms of what's happened and
on the
with the
penalties,
railings and all these things.
Before George does go,
yeah,
I do think the penalties don't mean nothing.
They don't mean anything, no. But I was behind that goal, and you could see it meant a lot to him. Like he was smiling. He was like it felt like a weight off his shoulders type thing. And
keeper should never save. A keeper should never save a penalty. That's what I think personally.
Yeah. Obviously, I think that obviously what is it? 0.77 xG. You shouldn't. The goalkeeper shouldn't save that level of chance. But yeah, I know it's going to sound a bit hollow, but if you read the Players Tribune article, I think it shows the kind of insight that we don't get into footballers, and he's obviously had a very tough time of it this past season. And I think all of us on the channel would just like to wish him a well wish, and then hope he has a good season. And with the rare coming in,
from the man that didn't wish well on the Queen. How ironic.
No, I'm
not letting you freaking quadruple down. Anyways, the biggest thing is that I've learned since I got my experimentation stolen is that I think that Can you stop?
No.
The biggest thing that I've learned is probably that Arsenal are a big boy club again. The whole Declan Rice transfer still hasn't hit in for me personally, for having been such a big advocate on the channel here with all the boys about it. It's just it's been insane. I think us doing it and breaking the British transfer record, it's been one of the best things that I've learned, because I feel like we're ready to compete and we're ready for the title. I know that we're gonna wait for predictions to do that, but I'm not really waiting. For me, it's the time for the title. And I think that we've sent a message with our transfer business this year that we are ready for the title. I love the fact that we've got a statue for Arsene Wenger. I think that was long overdue. Thank you will still never be enough. But one last thing, probably that's a little bit less known by everybody, is we had some excellent deals confirmed commercially right now with Juliet Slot, which is our chief commercial officer, who kind of talked about our new sponsorship with Emirates, which kind of got parity, by the way, with Real Madrid, only second to Manchester City, and we beat even PSG in terms of our numbers. Like, we're earning over 70 million a year. So excellent deal. And so we finally have got contracts that are kind of representative of our big boy status.
Let's just put it this way: we're the biggest legal deal in football.
Yeah, so I'm really excited about that. And look, I hope you guys really enjoyed this kind of breakdown of the preseason. We got some more content coming for you guys. We'll be back tomorrow to talk about kind of the Community Shield. But in the meantime, before you guys head out, make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe, hit that bell for notifications to know when, in fact, we do upload. Thank you so much for everybody tuning in. We appreciate all of you guys fans. Thank you for bearing with us with this summer, and we hope to have a lot more content coming your way. Find all the boys' socials down below, so you can find me at GeorgeV_AFC, Chris at CKFTBL, and of course Curran at Curran BOP, and we are Ball Over Passion here on YouTube, or at BOP Footy on Twitter, almost like we haven't missed a step. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your night, and we'll catch you guys tomorrow for the big preview. Peace.
Peace.